The bald rationalizations that the religious go through to get back to their emotionally comforting faith is just absurd. But we know that already, right? They don't talk to us because we just point out all of their problems, and that's too emotionally distressing. Therefore, they just make up nonsense in their heads. It's a whole lot easier than just thinking critically. So, anyway, away we go. Welcome back to part two of the Problem of Evil video on William Lane Craig's channel. Thanks once again to Susse Kind for reminding me that I never got to it, and I just apologize for taking so long. That said, though, this is going pretty much how I expected it to. Lots of empty claims and no evidence of any kind because, as we all know, the religious just don't care. So let's launch into the last part where whoever this is, they never say, shows us why Christianity, at least the brand practiced by Craig and others like him, is so damn dumb. And I trust nobody will be surprised by that. Let's get into it.
Second, mankind is in a state of rebellion against God and His purpose.
Says who? Because the only people who are likely to bring up the problem of evil in the first place are atheists. And atheists are not going to take any of this doctrinal and ideological nonsense seriously. This is how you know that they're not making any of this stuff for us. They are preaching to the choir, which granted are the only people who are likely to give them any money or buy into any of this crap, so I guess that's not unexpected. Christian apologetics is all about reinforcing the beliefs of people who already believe in Christianity. It has nothing at all to do with proving any of it is remotely true. And that's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say? It also seems to be a terrible tactic because if you're not actively trying to convince the non-believers, not only are you failing in the Great Commission, but from a more practical and realistic standpoint, they're losing out on potentially even more money for all the new converts that they might make who tend to be more fanatical than the old guard is. So either they know they've got nothing at all to convince the opposition and they're not even trying, or this is all just a scam. Let me know which one you think it is down in the comments, or maybe you think it's something else entirely. Let me know.
Terrible human evils are testimony to man's depravity, a consequence of his alienation from God.
But that's not even what the problem of evil addresses. Mostly, it's talking about natural disasters, disease, things that are entirely beyond the control of humanity. Are we supposed to think that the weather is a filthy sinner? Of course, the religious often use natural disasters to claim that God is punishing mankind for his sins, which of course just makes God a dick. An even bigger dick than normal, I mean. It proves that the omnibenevolent label is not one which they can logically apply to their imaginary friend. Their response, at least typically, is, "Will God put you into this world? He can take you out." So now God is an abusive father figure in the sky. I mean, none of this actually helps their case, does it?
The Christian isn't surprised at moral evil in the world. On the contrary, he expects it.
Of course, he does this because his entire theology is based on it. That doesn't make any of it true. This is what happens when you start with conclusions and then have to work backwards, which is what most religions tend to do. Most of these claims are just bald rationalizations designed to confirm the things that they already believe on faith. That also doesn't prove that any of it is true. It's why when Christians, and to be fair, other theists as well, claim that they are being persecuted, all you have to do is look into their holy books and find where it says they're going to be, because this is just confirmation bias. Then they just automatically interpret any hardship or opposition as persecution, so that they can feel better about the crap that they believe. People telling you that you're wrong when you're wrong, that's not persecution, that's reality. Get a grip.
The third doctrine states that God's purpose is not restricted to this life, but spills over beyond the grave into eternal life.
Something that, sadly, you can't prove is real. Again, no atheist who is likely to be asking about the problem of evil is going to be taking any of this faith and fifi talk seriously, nor should they. It's why we have to hit them up front before they go running down the primrose path into insanity. It's why they don't want to talk to us unless they have complete control over the venue. Otherwise, they just look dumb. Mostly because they are.
This world is just the beginning, the entryway to an unimaginable, never-ending life beyond death's door.
Says you. Now, prove it. Because that's something else that a lot of people, religious and otherwise, don't seem to understand. Just because you make a claim, that doesn't make that claim valid. It's why we rely on evidence to see which claims are actually more likely to be true and which are just the product of overactive imaginations and flapping lips. This is something that I say all the time, but it bears repeating. I don't care about your beliefs. I care what's actually going on in factual reality. I care how you can get there, how you can prove it without relying on faith. If there actually is a real existing God out there somewhere, I will believe it once you can actually support it with direct, demonstrable evidence, and not until. My feelings don't matter, and neither do yours. And I think it's pretty widespread among a lot of atheists, or at least where it applies to religious claims, which is why they don't really want to have a back and forth conversation with actual atheists. They only want to talk to people who already believe the things that they do, because we're going to ask all the questions that they have no answers to. We're going to point out all the empty claims that they're making, and they don't like that. It's a whole lot easier to just appeal to people who already believe and really aren't that interested in the facts. Those people are gullible, and we generally are not.
Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, underwent afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, hunger. Yet he wrote, "We do not lose heart. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Because we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal."
Yep, your book says a thing. Most of those things are completely unsubstantiated, just held because of church tradition, with no independent corroboration whatsoever. Now, granted, I'm not really going to complain because undergoing hardships, if all of that actually happened, that doesn't make any of the claims in the Bible true. People believe things for bad reasons and have all kinds of bad things happen, but that doesn't affect the actual validity of their beliefs whatsoever. It just plays into the torture porn narrative of Christianity, and that doesn't change anything, no matter how much they seem convinced that it does.
Paul understood that life on earth and whatever suffering it holds for each of us is temporary. Our pain will not endure forever, but our lives with God will.
Again, that's your story, but that doesn't make your story true. Everything in this video so far has just been Christian story time, and that's pretty much all they have in their arsenal. Whether they like it or not, that doesn't impress us, nor should it impress them. But they aren't really doing this for the facts, only for the faith. We, unfortunately for them, we are in it for the facts, and we don't care about the faith. It's why they spend so much time talking past us or about us instead of with us. And that's kind of sad, right?
Paul was not belittling the plight of those who suffer horribly in this life. Indeed, he was one of them. But he saw that those sufferings will be overwhelmed forever by the ocean of joy that God will give to those who will freely receive it.
He believed a thing that he couldn't demonstrate, and he, at least according to tradition, suffered because of it. Well, lots of people do that, don't they? The 9/11 hijackers all gave their own lives willingly because they thought they'd get a bunch of virgins after death. But that doesn't make it true. We can find tons of examples of this throughout history. Lots of dead Heaven's Gate cult members, lots of dead Jim Jones followers, lots of dead Branch Davidians, all of whom died believing that they were going to a better place. It's just that, as far as we can tell, they were all wrong. They died for nothing. They suffered for nothing. And whether Christians like it or not, Paul and other martyrs, they probably did too. This is where faith and fifis get in the way of a simple acknowledgement of reality. And that again is why they aren't talking to us, because they really just want to believe.
And the fourth doctrine is this: the knowledge of God is an incomparable good.
Says who? I mean, I understand that you believe that, but belief isn't knowledge unless you can back it up in some kind of demonstrable way. That is where we have so many problems, because the religious, and to be fair, a lot of people who aren't as well, they are relying on fifis and faith and don't want to face the world without them. This is exactly why I stop every single theist and ask how they know that. Not what they want to be true, what is actually true. How do you prove it to somebody who doesn't already believe the things that you believe? Because this is the very basis of the scientific method, getting rid of as many preconceived notions as possible to get down to what is actually going on in the real world. This is why people like Low Bar Bill lower the bar for their religious beliefs, because they just want it to be true. They don't really care if it actually is. You have to reach a point where you care. And that's why the religious fail so often.
Knowing God is the ultimate fulfillment of human existence, an infinite good.
Again, says who? Oh, I know it makes you feel good, but that doesn't actually get you anywhere. This is the problem of hard solipsism. We are inherently trapped inside of our meat suits, with only our senses to tell us what's going on around us. That assumes that our senses can be trusted. It assumes that what we receive is real, and there's absolutely no way to verify that independently. It's like watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? I mean, the good British version. You see them up on stage going through the motions, but they're not actually doing anything. Oh, well, I built a machine that will tell us what's really going on. Great. How do you know that? How do you know that you built it when you only have your own senses to tell you things, and those senses could be wrong? Worse, what do you think you're going to use to interpret the data from the machine? What can you evaluate it with except your already questionable senses? A lot of people get really uncomfortable at the thought, but that's really the reality that we have. We just make up a baseline, something pretty arbitrary, on what we're going to call reality because we have to call it something. Otherwise, everything is pretty pointless. If you question all of your senses, then it all falls apart because I can't even ask you what you're sensing because I have to rely on my own senses to receive the answer. I can't even prove you're real. I can't even prove I'm real. This is why philosophy has struggled with this forever and probably always will, because we just can't get out of our own heads.
Thus, the person who knows God, no matter how much he has suffered, can still say, God is good to me. So, if Christianity is true, it's not at all improbable that suffering and evil should exist.
If is not because. Now, leaving aside all of the solipsism stuff, since that's a rabbit hole down which no rational mind can enter and certainly none can escape, it becomes very obvious what's going on here. This is just, but I really want to believe. And that doesn't actually get you anywhere. wanting to believe means nothing. It's why we ask for evidence, not belief, not faith, evidence. It is an effort to get out of your own head, at least as much as you can get there and into the real world. Just because you look around and see gods everywhere, that doesn't mean anything any more than if you saw pink elephants everywhere. I'm not asking what you see. I'm not asking what you interpret. I'm asking how you justify your beliefs in some demonstrable way, and the religious, sadly, can't do that. It's why they have so many problems.
In summary, for all these reasons, the probability version of the problem of evil is no more successful than the logical version.
Only because you're looking at the problem of evil wrong. Now, I've said this many times, but as far as I'm concerned, and this is just me, but the problem of evil has nothing at all to do with the actual existence of God and everything to do with the arbitrary characteristics that Christians have just assigned to their magical imaginary friend in the sky. It all comes down to, well, God is like this. How do you know that? Because that is a fair question and one that has to be asked. How do they know what their God is actually like, absent faith and fifis? I don't care about your faith and fifis. If you are asserting an actual God, a real existing God, then I need to see what your actual God is like. I need to see the evidence so that I can fairly evaluate it. If you can't provide a way that I, as a non-believer, can learn about your actual God, then the conversation is over. This is like talking about Pokemon. Well, Pikachu is real. Really? How do you know that? This is what Pikachu is like. Okay, and how do you know that? How do you get there without playing the games or watching the cartoons or whatever else you're doing? Because how did the people who made those things, if we're going to assume that any of this is real, how did they know anything? These people don't have any answers, only assertions, and assertions don't mean a damn thing.
As a purely intellectual problem, then, the problem of evil does not disprove God's existence.
Nor does it try to. Of course, this entire video is just stupid hand-wavium meant to confirm what the believers already want to believe is true. None of these videos are being made for us because we ask too many difficult questions, like I have done this entire way through. Those are worthwhile questions, though, things that the religious just don't want to evaluate, which again is why they don't want to talk to us, because we cause too many problems and they just don't like it. Sad, huh?
But even if those intellectual arguments fail, the emotional problem of suffering and evil remains very powerful.
But emotions don't matter, and I know I'll catch a lot of flack for that, but it's true. We live in the world that we live in, whatever world that actually seems to be. If you're not concerned with the actual existence or characteristics of that world, then what the hell are you doing? This is where religion goes sideways, because not only do they not care, they are actively trying to hide from reality because reality isn't the emotional happy land that they actually want. They are trying to get somewhere comforting, not real, and reality is all that matters. Again, it's why they don't talk to us, because we and our way of thinking, it's just too scary for them.
If you have suffered deeply, or if you've watched someone you love go through intense pain, you may be thinking, so what if God exists? Why would I want to respond to Him or worship Him? I feel cold and empty and want nothing to do with Him.
I only want anything to do with a God that actually exists. Reality is what reality is. If there is a God, then a God is real, and I want to know what is real. Now, sure, given a choice between a good God and an evil God, I personally prefer the good God, but my preferences don't really matter. It is what it is. If there is an evil God, like what it describes in the Bible, then that God is real. We have to learn how to deal with that. If no gods exist, as seems to be the case based on all the evidence that we have, then we need to learn how to deal with that too. You don't just get to define a comforting reality into existence because you really want it to be there. That is not how any of this works. Yet, for the religious, that's all they do, right? Because they have never grown up into the mature adults who can handle reality. And that's kind of pathetic, isn't it?
You're not alone. God knows your name. He knows who you are and what you're going through. God promises to be with you through your suffering. He can give you the strength to endure.
All of which are just empty claims. God is not demonstrably real. This is like saying, well, Santa Claus will bring you presents. And if that doesn't happen, they're full of excuses for why Santa just didn't come through. God is exactly the same way. It's a made-up idea that some people like because they are just too immature to set childish things aside. They would rather live in a fantasy world in their heads than to deal with the actual reality that, at least as best as we can determine, is really there. That's who these videos are being made for. Children. Tell me you don't see it too.
Jesus Christ also suffered. Although he was innocent, he was tortured and sentenced to death. His suffering had a purpose: to provide you and me with a life-giving connection to God.
That is the stupidest damn thing ever. I mean, the whole Bible is. God set up the entire system knowing that it would fail, and yet he did it anyway. Then he decided to sacrifice himself to himself so that he could create an exception to the rules that he himself made up so that modern-day Christians could feel better about the asinine things that they believe. I mean, how much more obvious can you be that this is all just a giant load of horse puggy? Let me know in the comments if you think any of this is even remotely true.
Not only does God exist, but he loves you. He seeks after you. He offers you hope. And in time, he will make all things new.
Because we say so. We can't prove any of this, of course. You just have to believe. But sure, we'll make up a load of emotionally comforting nonsense because, well, we get paid to do it. Because this channel, Dr. Craig Videos, is monetized, and according to Starstat, he's made almost $50,000 this year alone, at least up to September when I'm writing this, and I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. It'll be more by the time this video hits YouTube, and that's a pretty good scam, don't you think?
He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. For the old order of things has passed away.
And that, too, is just a claim. That's all any of this is. But you really want to believe it, right? No, not really, because I care what's actually going on. Beliefs mean nothing. Facts do. But the religious don't care about any of that. It's why conversations go nowhere, because we don't have the same goals in mind. They want comfort, I want fact. The two don't have a lot to do with each other, do they? Yet it's when people are willing to settle for comfort in the face of an uncomfortable truth that things start to go wrong. Now, yes, some of that is human nature, but humans have a choice. We can make uncomfortable decisions because they are the better option on the table. That's what I did way back when. I mean, I could have just made excuses and said, well, the Bible says a lot, and just ignore all the facts that I uncovered. Or I could go with the actual evidence. The evidence that showed that the Bible, Christianity, and ultimately all religions, they all had problems. The biggest of them was that none of them are demonstrably true. The moment that you commit yourself to the facts without regard for your feelings, that's when you get closer to actual reality, and I want to live in a world that is actually real, where I understand, at least to the best of my own ability, what is going on. It doesn't matter if that makes me happy or sad. Standing on the railroad tracks with a train barreling down on me, no matter how many happy thoughts I think, I'm still going to get splattered. No, I need to get off the track so I don't die. Happy thoughts or no. The religious are just standing on the tracks with a blissful look on their faces, waiting to get run over. Why? Because they're idiots. Because they are wasting the only life that they demonstrably get playing make-believe. Because the only life that we have isn't the utopia that they really want. Well, too bad. The only thing they're doing is proving to the world that they're morons. And if that's what you really want, count me out. I am far too mature to be a theist. Sadly, the same can't be said for everyone.